and welcome to the first day of Beats Evolution Conference. My name is Hannah and I'll be your host for this room whole day. So right now we're having 3 masterclasses. So the first one is dedicated to Serato's new plugin, which is called Serato Sample. And hopefully you guys will get some insight into how could it improve your everyday music making. So enjoy.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. I'm Blakey, Artist Relations Rep for Serato in Europe. We've been working on an exciting new project that we're now ready to share. So we've seen that the DJ world and the producer world overlap. And we thought it was about time that we brought some of the things that Serato DJ does really well into the producer world in a more official capacity. So what we've made is Serato Sample. It's a sampler plugin that works in Ableton, Fruity Loops, Logic, Machine, basically any DAW that can load VSTs. So at its core, Serato Sample utilizes the quick and easy cue point triggering workflow made famous in Serato DJ. DJs have been using this way of working to make edits, remixes, and flips for years. With Serato Sample, we've improved this workflow even more by adding plenty of tools to make this a fun and fast way to create your own beats. So let's open up Serato Sample and get going. I've got an Ableton Live session here. So I've actually already got it loaded there. Let's delete that. So to open up an instance of Serato Sample, you head to the VST folder or the plugins folder and double click on Serato Sample. So when you open it up, it will ask you to load a file, and you can load a file from your browser or you can just drag one into the window there. So once you load a file, let's find one. I'm going to load up this Skepta track. So once you load a file, you can see that the layout is similar to a DJ deck inside Serato DJ. So let's go ahead. Turn that up. So you can scrub through the track here, just like you can in Serato DJ. And you can set some hot cues in the 16 available banks that you have down here at the bottom. So let's zoom in a little bit. So let's set one at the first kick there. Scrub through a bit more. I'm just going to manually set some hot cues now, just so that we have something to work with. Little hi-hat there. So what you can do as well is after you've set these, you can drag out the bottom here to determine how long the length of the sample is. So if you drag it all the way out there, and if you leave it all the way in tight, it will just carry on indefinitely. So with something like a hi-hat, I like to make sure that the kick afterwards doesn't bleed into it. You can also affect the parameters for each individual pad. So for each individual pad, you can affect the filter here. To the right is a high pass. To the left is a low pass. So you can do this on each individual pad. I'll get into that in more detail a little bit later, so let's put them back to 0. You can also affect the attack. Let's set some more. What you can also do is inside Serato Sample, you have the power of Serato's pitch and time stretching and transposing algorithm. Now, this is an industry standard in the world of production. No matter how much you time stretch a sample or how much you transpose it up or down, it won't lose any of its quality. It will retain all of the quality that it had in its original state. There'll be no artifacts. And again, you can affect that for each pad individually. So let me just show you that. So you can, this is to time stretch it here. You can either go down in 1% here, or this is very handy. Here you can halve, or rather set it down to -50 time stretch, and you can double it with that as well. You can also key shift it. So I'm going to go more in depth with this as the presentation goes on, and you'll be able to hear that no matter how much you manipulate the sound, how much you stretch it, how many semitones you pitch it up or down by, it will still retain all of its quality. So I've set some hot cues there. I'm just going to load up another project here where I've used the same track and written in some MIDI notes to create just a little beat.
Tracksuit bow. Tracksuit bow bow. Tracksuit bow. Tracksuit bow bow.
So just going to go in and show you some of the pads that I've selected. So this one I just chose a small hi-hat there. Wanted to stretch it out a little bit, so turned it down -15%, just to make it a little bit longer so it wasn't so short. Did the same there with a snare drum.
Tracksuit. Bow bow.
What I also did as well, I'm just going to play the original song for you at its original tempo. So up here in Serato Sample, you can see that I've got sync enabled. If I turn sync off, the song will play at its original tempo, which is almost 70 BPM. Once you hit sync, it will sync with the tempo of your project in your DAW. So I'm just going to take it off sync and just going to play you the track. So I also showed you how to transpose and time stretch each pad individually. But what you can also do is you can also hear, this is the global key of the track. So once you transpose this up or down, it will transpose the entire track, so all of the pads as well.
Got cold feet and I can't sit still. Do what I want cause I got no chill. Yeah, you know the deal, come and a true raver. I've been on more waves than a sailor.
When I turn up all over the radar, you know about shot man in Jamaica. I care about now, don't care about later. But that's just the way that I live. Anywhere that I go, when I'm blazing a split, bounces are like when I'm taking a piss.
So hopefully you can hear there how it retains its quality. So I'm going to hit it, put it back into sync.
Tracksuit bow. Tracksuit bow bow. Tracksuit bow.
When you're playing back what you've made, it can be a little bit tricky when the view is like this to affect any of the pads. So this little snowflake icon here, hit that, that's freeze mode. So it will stop and then you can jump in to any of the pads while it's playing and affect them however you want. So that's just a quick intro into how to set hot cues. Are there any questions so far? Feel free to ask anything you like. No? Cool. Okay, right, going to open up a new project here where I've put together I don't want to call it a song, but yeah, it's a beat with a few different instances of Serato DJ. So let's minimize all of these for now. So I always start off a track with drums. So I opened up an instance of Serato Sample, and there's a classic garage track called Pulse X that you might recognize that I wanted to sample. So I'm going to play it in its original state. So take it off sync and put it back to 0. Zoom out a bit. So the key of this track is C, so I've just transposed it down to -2. I'm actually making the track at 135, and the track is already at 135, but I'm going to hit sync anyway, because it was slightly below 134.3, so let's just make that a bit tighter. So again, I went through, scrubbed through the song, set hot cues at every part of the track that I wanted to sample, so let's just go through those. Zoom in a little bit. Snare there. I've time stretched that down quite a bit. Again, just to lengthen the sound so it wasn't so quick. So I've time stretched it down -33%, which normally would be quite a lot. But because we're using Serato Sample, which has Serato's pitch and time algorithm built in, no matter how much you transpose something or time stretch something, it still sounds really good. I've also turned the volume or the level down on that just a tiny bit because it's quite a heavy snare. Here, just got like a little percussion hit that I found. That's a kick drum with a bass note behind it. I've time stretched that down -10%. Little double hi-hat. I've left that one as it was. Another hi-hat, I've time stretched that down -27%. Now that one I've time stretched down -75. This is what it would have sounded like at 0. So it's actually the same as that. But obviously I want it to be different and want something -75 there. That hi-hat there I've time stretched -40. And that one's at -50. So it's also worth noting that, as you can see, some of these pads, all the pads that I just played you, they've got a little white star icon. That's because each of those pads, I've gone in and I've favorited them here. So I jumped into the MIDI, used those hot cues to write a little beat. It sounds like this. I also wanted to get a brighter hi-hat in there, so just threw in a little top loop from Loop Masters and just picked out a hi-hat. Pretty straightforward, that. It's a little bit too dull without that. Also worth noting that I have time stretched that down by -27 because it was just a little bit too short. So Next thing I wanted to do is I wanted to get a break of some sort behind the drums to give it a bit of texture. So I've just thrown in Amen Brother by the Winston Brothers. Actually, let's have a listen to that in its original state. Let's turn it off sync. So what I did here, down in the bottom left, in Serato Sample here, you have 4 different auto set features. This is seriously handy for just chucking in a sample, an a cappella, a break, and being able to automatically find inspiration quickly. So I'm going to take you through these auto set features here. So for this particular sample, for this Amen break, I've used Set Slicer. So hit Set Slicer. Actually, let's make sure that it's right at the start. Yeah, cool. So I've hit Set Slicer, and what it will do is it will automatically slice the break, much like an old piece of software called Recycle. Some of you might remember. It will just slice the track up and then spread those across these pads here. So once you jump into the MIDI, actually let's put that back on sync. So I've written in that variation of the Amen break in the MIDI there. A little bit of EQ as well. Now I wanted to take the bass sample that was in the track that I've created the main drums from. So I loaded in the same song that I've used to make the beats from, Pulse X, and I wanted to use this bass sample here. So there's the sample. Now what I've done is, once you select one of your pads, if you click on this keyboard icon here, it will spread the sample. It will spread the sample across your keyboard. So what you can do is, any instance of Serato Sample where you've got 16 cues set, you can throw any single one of them across a keyboard at any moment. So after that, I wanted to find a vocal sample, not saying anything specifically, just a vocal sample to give it that kind of human element. So opened up another instance, a Serato Sample, and I loaded in an a cappella by Chromeo, a song called Hot Mess. So I'm going to play that to you in its original state. So I've transposed it down -2 to match the key of the project, which is C. Let's put that at 0.
I put my loving on the line for you, lady, but my spirits were low. I would've committed a crime for you, baby. Yeah, it got out of control. Out of control.
So as you can see, I've set some cues down here throughout the track. I'll just play you those. So here it is. So I'm going to use that little bit of vocal there. Now I wanted to add some pads of some sort, a chord, some music basically, so it's not just beats and bass. So I loaded in an instrumental of a Jill Scott track called Golden. I'm sure you all know it. Just going to play you that on its own. Take it off sync, transpose it up to 0. So I want those chords at the start, the chords that are in between the claps. So what I did was similar to the aim and break, I've used the set slicer feature here. There are some other auto set features which I'll be going into in a moment. So for this one, I've used set slicer. Now, as you can see, I've already favorited some of the pads here. What happens when you favorite a pad is it means that if you press the auto set feature again, it will refill all of the pads that you haven't favorited and it will keep the ones that you have. So I'm just to show you what set slicer does, just gonna hit set slicer and it's gonna refill all of the pads that I'm not using anyway. And that's also a really cool way of, if you just wanna find some new inspiration, you can hit one of these auto set features and chances are you'll find something through that you wouldn't have necessarily used straight away. So let's have a listen through the ones that I've favorited. So as you can see with this one, I've time stretched it down -65, which is normally a lot. But because of pitch and time, Serato's pitch and time, which is inbuilt to Serato Sample, it will still sound really crisp. So that one's at -75. That one again, -75. And -60. So with those samples, I jumped into the MIDI and wrote this little pad sequence. Actually, let's transpose it down so it matches the key of the project. What you can also do as well is, so I'm back into the Jill Scott instrumental here, where I've set the pads through the slicer mode. What you can also do is, if you hit select all here, that means that any of these parameters that you manipulate, it will now affect all of the pads together. So if I just turn the filter down there. So I'm just turning the filter up gradually. also affect the attack on all of them together. So let's just quickly have a listen to it all together. It won't win any Grammys, but it's all right. So I'm now going to take you through the auto set features in more detail. This is one of the features of Serato Sample that make the plugin really improve your workflow, because the auto set features, if you just keep using them, you'll find bits of the track that you'll want to use and you'll find new inspiration very easily. So let's jump into the drums here. So as I said before, all of the pads that I've favorited, they're there to stay. So no matter how many times I use the auto set feature, they're not going to go anywhere. So all of these are staying. But these ones that I haven't favorited, every time I use the auto set feature, they're going to get refilled. So I've showed you set slicer. You can use it to just set randomly. So it will just refill the unfavorited pads with random parts of the track. Do you know what? It would make more sense to do that with an acapella. So let's go back to the Chromia acapella. Here we go. So these unfavorited pads here, I'm going to go to set random. So that really is random. It will just set cues at any point throughout the track. Sometimes you'll find some cool stuff doing that. My personal favorite is to use fine samples here. So the algorithm will choose parts of the track that it thinks that you'd like to sample. Let's hit it again.
You're hot. Your love is real. I feel so lonely. Got nothing to lose. You're.
So you can always find some new inspiration by using those. Are there any questions so far? Come on, there must be at least one.
I have
Come
a
on.
question.
Go on.
I have a question. So you just press the find samples button for the not random but somehow smart finding of samples. Okay, so you just pressed find samples and that found some samples in a smart way, right?
Yep.
And then you favorited some, but then you pressed it again. Did it find other ones then?
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you what. Yeah, let's use that. So yeah, you can use the auto set feature. Let's use find samples, and it will refill all of the pads that are not favorited.
Social work.
And then as soon as you hit it again, it will refill them again. So you can just continuously use it to just listen through samples and try and find some new inspiration. Let's try that out on that.
You also can change, if you put the blind sample, you can change it because there are not so much good ideas for me. So you can in that move it to the...
Yeah, you mean like manually go in and... Oh, of course, of course. Of course. So, yeah, so your question was, can you go in and manually manipulate all of the...
Find sample, but there is not everything you want to use, so you can maybe manually...
Yeah, absolutely. So let's use the aim and break here. So let's go to find samples in the aim and break track. So that's refilled all of the pads. So let's say, okay, so we're good with that one. So as you can see, the snare, it doesn't start right at the very beginning. So you can jump in and, yeah, no worries. And you can also drag the tail out here so that the next sample doesn't bleed into it. Are there any more questions?
Please, if anyone has any questions, feel free to grab our mic, so you don't have to shout.
I will repeat the question for everyone because it's just better audible. The question was if the algorithm that picks samples is a learning one, so it's like artificial intelligence.
No, it's not learning, but so let me jump into a sample here. So as you can see that the colors of all of the transients are different. So I'm going to explain those to you. So all of the red transients represent low sounds, so kick drums, bass sounds. The blue ones represent high sounds, hi-hats, and the green ones will represent mids. So while it doesn't learn what you like when you're using it, it knows the frequency of the sounds, so it does use that to pick the samples. Does that answer your question? Good. So to use inside a DAW like Ableton?
Yeah, I have a favorite track and I just want to use fragments of it. And I'm using Serato Sample just to take these fragments out of the music. Is it possible to use it out of Serato Sample somewhere else?
Okay. Okay, I see what you mean. No, it's not possible to do that yet. However, this is the first instance of Serato Sample. It's been out for a couple of weeks. And we're very big on artist feedback. So everything that artists ask of us to put into the software, it's definitely something that we can look at. Anyone else?
The algorithm is the same at the Serato. The colors are definitely same like the Serato.
Yeah,
DBS.
That's right. Yeah,
Okay.
the colors inside Serato Sample that represent the frequencies are the same in Serato DJ.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
No worries. Do you have any questions, Carl? Cool. Okay. Well, we've got a little bit of time left. Yeah, go for it.
I'd missed your first 15 minutes, so I apologise for that. You obviously were breaking it down from the very beginning of laying down the track. How can you use this in a live capacity? Is it suitable?
So it's not a live tool. It's a production tool. What I'll do, it will only take a couple of minutes. What I'll do is I'll go back to the start, load up a new file, and show you what you can do with it, basically. So, Ableton Live here. So you've got Ableton Live here. open up Serato Sample. So when you open Serato Sample, it will ask you to load a file. You can also drag one in, but I'm going to use the Finder here. So I'm just going to load in this Skepta track. So once you load up a track, you've got the 16 hot cue triggers here. And it's got similarities to Serato DJ, so you can scrub through the track. So yeah, you get the idea of that. So you can set hot cues, and then you can jump into each hot cue and affect the parameters for each. Yeah, exactly. You can either actually click on the pad with your mouse, or I was triggering them then with a MIDI keyboard. So because none of these are set, you can just go to a point and then just press a key, and that'll trigger it there. One of the pads?
Yeah. You can do it by the mouse.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
You can just trigger them with a mouse.
This is like the hot cues on Serato, yeah?
Precisely.
Okay.
Precisely. It's just like using the hot cues in Serato DJ.
I have another question.
Yeah.
So if you were to play a beat live with your MIDI keyboard, would it be like sort of flip playing in like monophonic, or could you change that?
So that kind of aligns with your question about using it live. So you could do, I've just set these, just a couple of quick cue points here. So you could do that. By default, it's in mono mode, which means that you can only, whenever you press a key, it will just play that one key, and you can't press two or more keys together. In poly mode, you could load up a sample like a chord or a pad, and you can play multiple pads together. I'm not very good at playing chords, so I'm not going to try that. Did that answer your question? Cool. Any more questions?
That means you can play by the one button many of the Serato samples. Then I understand right? So you can control 2 VST in one time. So you have two different samples on the same pad. That's right? Understand well?
I don't believe that's possible, no?
That is possible by doing it with the host, because you could assign your MIDI to two instances of Serato Sample.
Not from one computer.
But what we just showed was, or what Blakey just showed was, that you can play multiple samples within one instance at the same time. So that is what we call polyphonic mode.
Yep.
But what you want to do is possible as well by just using two instances of the same sample VST and assigning them both to MIDI.
Any more questions?
Are you able to set any automatization direct in Serato? For example, increase level or something like that?
Yeah, you mean for each individual pad?
Yes.
Yeah, so for each individual pad, so I've loaded up another project here, which is where I've already set some cues. So yeah, you can, every time you trigger one of these cues, you can affect all of these different parameters. So let's just, so here, I'm triggering the hi-hat here, which is this pad here. So you can, for instance, affect the filter. You can also affect the volume here. Attack. And release. this is where you favorite the sample. You can also throw each sample into reverse. And you can also key shift each pad up and down.
Another question?
Oh, you mean automate? Yeah. So you can, just like any other VST, you can automate each parameter inside your Ableton Live session. So you just head here, Serato Sample, and then all of your different parameters are there, just like any other VST.
You can MIDI map everything as well. There's access to all the parameters that you have within Serato Sample. And if you have some MIDI hardware that you can speak to your host, you can make them control those parameters as well. I have another question for you, Blakey. Because you just showed going up and down semitones with individual samples. So could you load the same sample on different pads and change them to different semitones?
Yep, absolutely. So
play kind of chords with that.
So let's do that. I'm going to open up a new instance of sample here. Load in the same track. So I've loaded up, this is a fresh instance of Serato Sample. Let's hit Find Samples. It will fill up all the banks with samples throughout the track. So let's listen through them. Oh, let's put it on first.
Tracksuit Mac 5. Bow, bow.
Cool. So what you can do is you can hit clear all here. That'll wipe them all. So let's set a snare there. So let's run through each key and just set the same sample on each key. And then you can jump into each pad and transpose it down random amounts and up. This was your question, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Cool. So whenever you load a track into Serato Sample, what it really does is it loads 16 instances of that track. So you can affect the same song and even the same part of each song in 16 completely different ways. Does that answer your question, Carl?
Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions, guys? The cost is $99. It came out a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, head to the Serato website to check it out. I've actually got some USB keys with some versions of the software on, which I'll be handing out afterwards. So come and see me at the end of this presentation if you'd like one.
I have a question. Is it possible to store like the samples you've chosen per one track? Like to have a kind of sort of a library? If you understand what I mean? Yeah, not just exporting it, but you kind of have this. Yeah, maybe yes, but like having in one track, you said you have 16 tracks, but to have, for example, 4 different banks of 16 samples per each kind of loop or whatever you have.
So you mean having 64 samples?
Yeah, that's also regarding to the question of the colleague behind me to the live kind of suitability of it.
Right, at the moment you can only use 16 banks. What I would do in that scenario is just load up a new instance, load in the same track and just do your thing. As I said before though, the software's only been out a couple of weeks, so there's going to be some major improvements in the upcoming versions over the next, year or so.
Yeah, the limit really is your computer, basically. You can load it up as many instances of sample as you wish, and whatever you get to give focus to, that one you can control with your MIDI keyboard, pretty much. So you got 16 per instance, but you can have infinite instances as long as your computer can run it.
Any other questions? You sure? Okay, cool. Well, that's everything. Thanks for coming, guys.